We're back. It's the Horns Up Talking Texas podcast. Fisher Disciples, DJ, Nikki, Snacks, Crider. The boys were in Dallas, had a bye week in Houston. We were back at home this past weekend in DKR, taking on the BYU Cougars in our first matchup with them as they're in the Big 12. They have had our number in the past. Not the case this time. The Horns cover the 19-point spread. The game goes under. 35-6 is the tune. They win, bringing our conference record to 4-1, which is fantastic, gentlemen. Malik Murphy had his first start. Cole Hudson came back, had a limited snap count with 19 snaps. Ryan Watts came back, no limited snap count. He was targeted twice, 0 receptions on him. Great to have him back in the mix, a guy that we felt is very pivotal to our hopeful playoff run. And maybe more importantly, in the interim, getting through the Big 12 unscathed and seeing how things play out. But I would say maybe from an offensive standpoint, not an excellent game, but from the defense, you really can't ask for much more. And so I'll start off with things we liked and things we didn't like. Very simple segment name, but we'll go around the horn. I'll start off with something I liked. I really, really liked the way we tackled, and I really liked, us getting in there in the backfield and getting the tackles for a loss. The sack numbers weren't out the roof, but 12 tackles for a loss is absolutely fantastic out of the defense. And we made Keaton Slovis, who's an experienced quarterback, and there was a time where he thought to be the prince that was promised for the USC Trojans. We made his life a living hell, in BYU's game at DKR, and it was really great to see our defense bounce back after they broke, admittedly, in the last drive against Oklahoma, after they let the Houston Cougars back into the game last weekend. It was great to see them have a bounce back game and hold the BYU Cougars, who had a decent offense, to under 10 points.
Yeah. I love the point on the tackling. I think my takeaway, part of this is in reflection of the defense's good play, but also, our talented playmakers who stepped up in certain moments. Takeaway for me is just, it's really good to see in a game like this that we have a ton of NFL talent on the field, and in a different way. And I know we said this at the beginning of the season, but now 8 games in, I can say it, at least personally, with more certainty. I look across, this roster and just watching these games on Saturday, and there's some guys, we might end up with 3 first-round picks. We have, not only do we have guys that are going to end up in the NFL, but we have more guys in the first 3 rounds than we have had since 2009, maybe 2011's team. And, all credit to Sark and his, the rest of the development squad and the assistant coaches. But I'll just list off really quickly. JB is going to be a running back in the NFL.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to list.
First running back taken in the draft.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those first round picks that I'm talking about, it's Worthy, it's Mitchell, it's Jatavian Sanders. I expect even Whittington will get on a roster, and then Hill is not eligible for a draft yet, but he certainly will be going to the bigs. Jalen Ford, Sweat.
Sweat could be a first-round pick, late first-round pick, early second-round pick, man. He just keeps getting better and better every week, to be honest.
I wouldn't be surprised. Barron is absolutely going to be a professional.
A really good one. Yeah.
This team is really, really talented, and I was just happy to see that for our guys. So that was my positive takeaway.
Yeah, we've, as Texas fans, we've had years where there's never been a guy taken in the draft.
Yeah, crazy.
There's literally a year where it's just all undrafted free agents that go. And so for you to say that, I completely agree, one, and you texted us that, and I was thinking the exact same thing when JT made that one-handed catch that Maalik fit right, perfectly in the hole. He got popped and he held on to it. That's a big boy NFL catch, all across the board. And my takeaway, I feel like a game like this, we're going to have very similar takeaways because it's just pretty cut and dry how the game went. I'm really impressed with how the line played, both sides, obviously, but mainly the offensive side, in my opinion, getting us able to get big run blocks and put up big running numbers. And then, of course, keeping Maalik pretty healthy in the pocket, not giving up many sacks. I think they had 1 sack on him. So, that was a big game for him to stay on his feet, where we didn't need him to go down at all. He didn't really have any rushes, but keeping him healthy, giving him time to have his confidence get built up. I think that was a big one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nice. Negative takeaways. I think I will just say the negative sides of Maalik's debut. because yes, like all things considered, like
there's pretty obvious ones.
There's pretty obvious ones. Like having his confidence build up is great, and it is his first start. We remember Quinn's first start last year. We expected the world, and it wasn't like this big boom of a start. So there is going to be growing pains. He's not a pocket passer. He's not a rusher. He's not a mover. Like, he's in the pocket. And I think, for better or for worse, I think people just assume he's going to be a runner, but he's not. Like, he is a true pocket passer. So, I think allowing him time to develop. I loved how he was excited before the game, like before the first snap. He's hyping up the crowd, like, look, he's into it. He's bringing his swagger. He's bringing his confidence. He just needs to really, if he is going to be a pocket passer, he needs to stand strong, and he needs to stop throwing off his back foot, and he needs to strike and deliver. I texted you guys, like, every ball was either almost every single ball was either late, had too much air under it, thrown behind the receiver, too high or too low. Like, and he has the talent. And on the balls, like, there are certain balls where he dropped. Like, the Javen Sanders ball was nice. Like, there's certain balls where he dropped it in. There were some really pretty balls. So I don't want to say every ball, generalize, but I think by and large, he needs to match his talent with his efficiency and consistency. So there was a general lack of consistency, and there was a general lack of efficiency. And if he kind of maybe takes away the jitters of, hey, this is my first start. Hey, it's the pressures of playing for Texas, the pressures of the season now. Like, it's not first game of the season. Like, these are games that are huge. We've already had our quote unquote one loss, and we just saw in the rankings, not the tease like we're going to discuss later, like OU lost to Kansas and they dropped behind us. They've beaten us. OU's ranked 10 right now. So a loss to BYU, a loss to Kansas State is detrimental. Like, we could lose our shot at the final Big 12 championship. We could lose, obviously, the playoffs. So there is a lot of pressures, not only being the quarterback for the University of Texas, but there's pressures on keeping the season alive. So I think once he kind of gets all that under his belt and kind of can relax and play his game, I'm hoping that he can, eradicate like all those things I just said about like late throws, air under the throws behind, and really throw that zip that we've seen in the past, and hit our receivers who are unbelievably talented. Like, A.D. Mitchell is a beast. So I would, there he is, Bevo the dog, the new mascot. What's up, baby?
Yeah, I mean, he's the good luck charm of the season.
He's the good luck. We are undefeated with Bevo, 2-0 with Bevo the dog. But I would like to see Maalik settle down. I think, in long is the final line, I would say. I would like to see him settle down and relax and really play his game.
Yeah, this was not my negative takeaway, but just adding on to what you're talking about with Maalik. I hear you on all of the throws and everything like that, but to me, it's more so the decision making. When the pocket collapsed and he throws the errant pass out to the right side of the field and it goes right into the defender's hands, you can't have that mental mistake, right? You have to either eat the sack or you figure out a way to beat the edge guy and throw the ball away. Or you have to look at your safety valve and throw it at his feet, whatever it is, right? You can't make the mistake of giving the other team the ball on an easy turnover, right? Like that. So, and it was a lollipop throw too. It wasn't even like he jetted that thing to the defender's hands. So I think it's just something, and this is probably off-season work for him, but if he is a true pocket passer and he doesn't have the mobility of a guy like Quinn, then it's understanding how to read the edges, how to read your offensive line, how to step up in the pocket, knowing where to go, not necessarily breaking out of the pocket, but knowing how to move within the pocket. And that was one thing that, I'd like to see him continue to work on. And again, like I mentioned, it's just probably more so off-season work than between weeks right now. But I do feel like, and I'd love to hear you guys' opinion on this, do you feel like with how much Sark gave him the opportunity to throw the football that he might be a little bit more worried about Quinn's health than is being led on?
I don't think that's what my takeaway from that was. I think it's the smart thing to bring up. I think what he was trying to do coming out the gate with Maalik throwing, like, look, if Maalik comes out throwing hot, all of a sudden, BYU's defense doesn't know what they're getting with Maalik Murphy. It's his first game. So if he comes out and we're throwing hot, he's completing passes and he looks dangerous, that ultimately opens up the game for our actual most dangerous player in Jonathan Brooks. So coming in and like throwing the ball as much as he was A, he's trying to get him in rhythm, trying to get reps, and B, he's trying to create the feel of a threat from our passing attack, which ultimately dissipated when we lost Quinn Ewers. So if we have that threat, then ultimately our running game, and Brooks had a really good game still, but it wasn't his best game, right? So we really needed to and you know what? We were up by a lot, and when you're up by a lot, you want to anticipate him going for 150 yards, but he didn't even touch 100 yards. So I think that the idea behind Maalik throwing a lot was to create the threat of the pass game to open up the run game. I don't think it really had to do with Quinn's injury.
Yeah. And a lot of those first 3 drives are normally scripted plays anyway. So you're probably right on the money there.
I had that thought though. I was like, okay, why are we coming out throwing so much? And
I understood it. I mean, I did want to see Brooks get involved earlier on, but I mean, I think it's a big confidence builder. It's like, hey, like you're our guy. Go out and build the confidence early on, when you have the luxury of being at 0-0. If it's a case where we're down by a touchdown already, we're down by 14 points, and we're trying to force things and climb back in it, then, it could be a little tough to build the confidence and get the chemistry with the guys. So I understand a little bit. One of my negative takeaways, and this is just more of like a game management thing, is I just would have liked to see more out of some of the guys that are not necessarily the starters, the key pieces. Cause I mean, like this was a blowout win. We won by 29 points and like, we didn't really see Jonte Cook involved, like would have loved to see Casey Kane get involved. Would have loved to see, Gunnar Helm get involved. Like those are the guys, that eventually will take over the program, when these guys go to the NFL. And I think games like this, it's meaningful to get those guys snaps and to get them reps and to get them also confidence. And, if Maalik is our quarterback next season, getting Jonte a meaningful catch at it from Maalik is like a big thing in my opinion. And, I don't know if that's necessarily what was on, the mind of Sark, but at the end of the day, like if it's a game like this, I'd love to see everyone get some reps in.
Yeah, I think I'd say like Jaden Blue basically was the only guy out of that group that got his opportunity. He was great.
And he gets more opportunities than guys like Kane, and he gets more opportunities than guys like
to begin with,
and Cook. We were talking about this. We run a really tight rotation. Like we don't do a lot of again, like when I watch USC, there's a lot of personnel moving in and out. And I think that is a testament to Caleb's understanding of the offense. I think when you have like a guy like Maalik who's so new, switching personnel so frequently it could be very jarring. So if Quinn was in and we were blowing them out, I think we maybe would have seen Maalik come in and we would have seen the second unit come in with Maalik. But having the starters and continuing to get those reps with the starters, like every rep is valuable, even if you're blowing them out with Maalik. So I think maybe keeping a tight rotation to keep things as consistent and congruent as possible for him is maybe why that happened. But I would have liked to see that. I mean, we're seeing more and more of red, which is cool in that package. And it's nice. Like when we saw that maybe 7-8 years ago or whatever with the 18-wheeler package, it was almost out of desperation, right? It was almost like, all right, we don't know what to do with these guys anymore. So we just have to move them around the field and create these new packages to hopefully get something going. Where I think this new package with red, and when we bring him in, it's more of a player, it's more like a utility player. It's more of a tool. So I think, that's just another like back pocket thing that Sark's creating in the offense, which has been pretty nice. I'll get to my 3 stars. I'll list them out really quickly for you guys. I got to shout out Michael Taff, who was a walk-on, who was instrumental in recruiting Arch Manning. And that was like the walk-on that was helpful in recruiting him. And to see him come into this game and get a takeaway in the defensive backfield was awesome. You already mentioned Jahdae Barron, Toss, but that was his second best, rated game on PFF. He, once again, is fantastic. He's a senior. He's probably like a 5th or 6th round pick, but I truthfully think he's a guy that's going to the pros. And then sophomore Justice Finkley, I think he's starting to get into the mix really nicely. And he had a really good game against the BYU Cougars. I was really pleasantly surprised. And he was a guy that we were pretty psyched about when he was a recruit. So to see him get in there, he had a sack, he had a tackle for a loss, one of our 2 sacks. I thought that was a really nice game by him. So those are my 3 stars across the board.
Yeah, I had Barron as one of my guys too, and I'd honestly love to see him go even earlier in a draft. Like you mentioned the tackling at the beginning, that guy does not miss tackles, and he makes big tackles behind the line of scrimmage too. And as a defensive back, to be able to have that ability, that physicality, I hope someone takes a chance on him in the 4th round, and we'll see once we get to the draft. But I really, really love that guy.
He literally had 0 missed percentage on his tackles. Sorry to cut you, but I'm looking at it right here. Like, he had 4 tackles and he didn't miss a single one. So you're 100% right. He doesn't miss.
Yeah. And he's such an energy player for us too. I think he's always stepping up in big moments. And the one thing I will say about Nick, what you were saying about, the final score was a blowout. This game was, for the most part of the 3rd quarter, 21-6. And I kind of felt like, okay, if they do get one play on us, and our defense has been out there for a lot of this game, then it's a 1-score game. And then this is a totally different script. But our defense held strong. And I probably should have, at least 2 of my 3 kind of takeaway guys as defensive players. I don't. And maybe that's just me taking for granted how good this defensive line has been, because I think any one of our interior defensive linemen could be on, the top 3 kind of impact players of the week. But I had Barron, I had Xavier Worthy, because I think taking that punt to the house as your first score when you have a quarterback who has not started a game in college takes so much pressure off of him. And I know X-Man didn't even have 30 receiving yards. He had 4 catches, so he was quiet in that respect. But what he was able to do for our special teams unit to take that to the house, and to have a couple of other returns where he got 10 plus yards as well. It's just another kind of Savion Red-esque tool that our team has, an effort to score points week in, week out, that we haven't really had in past years. Like, it takes it back to like the Marquise Goodwin days as a return man. I know Duvernay had maybe a couple that he returned for touchdowns, but when X hits that second level, no one can catch him. He is so fast. And then my third guy was AD Mitchell, because again, I mentioned we might end up having 3 first-round picks. What X can do with his speed and off the break, AD can do with contested catches, finding the right spot on the field. And that is an indispensable trait for any wide receiver. It doesn't matter if you can beat your guy off the jump. It doesn't matter if you can get 5 yards of separation, because if you always make the catch and you're always in the right place for your quarterback, there's a spot for you on NFL teams. And I think, once again, AD Mitchell did that with a guy, of course, who he's working with in practice. But on game day, it's different. And those 2 touchdown catches, a lot of that credit goes to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. My first star is going to go back to being just the entire O-line. Like I said, keeping Maalik pretty clean and healthy in the pocket, and then getting our run game to be average, over 5 yards a carry is great. Anytime you have that, it's a good recipe for success, and probably gonna get a win in the win column. So the whole O-line gets it. There's gonna be a lot of guys there that are probably, maybe every single one of them might hit the NFL, honestly. My second one is T'Vondre Sweat. I mean, he was the highest rated defensive lineman, I think, in the Big 12 this week. And he just continues to get better, as you said, Josh. This is a guy that, I really think, could be an all-conference player, might end up being a first-round draft pick. And so when you have a D-line like that, they're game planning for, we talked to our guy Caleb, when he was breaking down the OU game with us, and he was saying the big boys up front, those were, he was highlighting, those are the stars of our defense, he thinks. So that's another one. And then I just think Anthony Hill, man, he just keeps getting better and better. I know he's a freshman and he doesn't play as many snaps as, all the starters do. But when he gets in there, he makes his presence known. And I think that he's going to be one of those forces to be reckoned with, next season. And already he's putting up crazy numbers this season. But when he's ready to be a full-time starter, and he's going to take the entire nation by storm, and you're going to get that love that like Devin White got, that like Patrick Queen got, that, those type of like Isaiah Simmons, those type of defensive players get, where you always need to know where he is on the field. He's always going to be making those big plays in prime time. So yeah, those are my highlights for right now.
Yeah, I think you did a really good job on the offensive line highlights. I think we had 4 guys graded 80 plus in PFF, and then T'Vondre Sweat not only was the highest grade defender, like what do you say, the highest grade Big 12 defender this week?
Yeah.
So he's the highest graded interior defensive lineman in the nation for the year.
There you go.
So I think maybe at this rate we're past the point, and not to discredit you, but I think we are in a good way. Like, we're past the point of like, hey, maybe he's an all-conference player, and we may be talking about an All-American here.
Yeah.
And to have to have an All-American at the defensive line position, like you want to tell me, are you ready for the SEC? That's it. That's the proof in the pudding in a nutshell. Like I can tell you that we're ready for the SEC because at the position where people said we weren't ready for the SEC, we're about to have an All-American. So that to me is very important. Jonathan Brooks also in the top 5 of his position, but we know what he is. And his receiving numbers, I'm hoping he could surpass what Bijan did. And Bijan was in the 300s last year. He's at 2-something right now. Jonathan Brooks, low 200s. And the last thing, I didn't say it in my takeaway, but I'm going to cheat here. Stop with the goal line. Take the points, dude. It's over. Like he's like, now it's like you're trying to get the monkey off your back and prove to yourself you can do it. Like it's becoming ridiculous. Like it's 3 times in a row now. Like, and that's points, man. Like we could have used the points, in OU. We could have used the points, and I get, and it's a big game, and that game is different. But take the points in the BYU game because you never know when you need them, right? And so I in a conference game, those can get sketchy. So just stop trying to punch it in and get that goal line move.
I completely agree. I didn't give my negative takeaway earlier, and I'll throw it in and I'll lump it in with you saying take the points to Sark. I understand, acknowledging that like a lot of times the script is set at the beginning of the game, and understanding that, Josh, your point about getting Maalik comfortable and also keeping the defense on their heels early is something that had a lot of benefit for things opening up for the rest of the game. I still don't like seeing Jonathan Brooks at the end of the day with 16 carries. And I also don't like seeing him through 3 drives having touched the ball twice. Like, I get all of that you put on the table, and I understand where it's coming from. But at the end of the day, this guy through 8 games is having a better season than Bijan Robinson. Like, he is right now the identity of our offense, or in my opinion should be, especially when we have our backup quarterback in there. And he eats in the middle of the field. He doesn't eat in the red zone. He's not that type of back. That's not where his specialty is. And so I think we're doing a little bit of a disservice to the guy who was the best running back in the Power 5 going into 2 weeks ago, and now he might not be, right? And I think that he's an instrumental part of our offense and our success for the rest of the season, and I would have liked to have seen him be used earlier in this game and be used more frequently. And maybe it just wasn't the matchup, but I didn't feel like the guys being in the box was too big of a task for him to get past, because he's able to make those cuts and those reads in a Bijan-esque type of way.
Very patient runner.
Such a patient runner. So I just was a little frustrated by the play calling, at least for like the first 3 or 4 drives. But, it happens. And I think it was compounded with the fact that then Maalik had a turnover. Right. Then I was like, okay, really, what are we doing here? Because this game is way too close. It's way closer than it should be in the first half. But obviously everything ended up all right. It's more so just kind of like, we can't continue to have games where we play at 70% capacity going forward when the pressure is so high on us. And these other teams will always give us their best. And our defense was able to bail us out this week. But all in all, I look at this BYU team and I am completely unimpressed in comparison to some of the other players and teams that we've played thus far in the season. And I know that playing Kansas State next week will be no slouch, as we like to say, because they just had a very impressive win in Manhattan, and now they're going to go down to DKR and they're going to be gunning for us.
Their losses aren't bad. They've lost to Mizzou, who's ranked. The Mizzou has bounced back this year. They're at top 15. And they lost at Oklahoma State. So losing in Stillwater to a team that's 6-2 and is the 26th ranked team, they received the most votes not in the top 25. They host Oklahoma. That's a big game we're all watching this week. Like, and to go now, we kind of jut into the rest of college football. Like, those are big games to keep an eye on. Kansas State, like we're saying, ain't no slouch, and they're going to come to give us their best. And they want to go to the Big 12 championship just like we do. Like, they want that just as much as we do, and so they're playing for something. Around college football, JMU, Jalen Green, I think is 4.5 sacks away from tying Elvis Dumerville's record for sacks in a season from JMU. Shout out to Patrick Murphy, our JMU friend alum. They're 8-0. They're ranked 23. Air Force is 8-0. They're ranked 17. We're ranked 7th. Oregon jumped us. Nick was a bit peeved yesterday as to why Oregon jumped us, but they went into Utah after Utah went into USC. They beat Utah. I think ultimately they're a better team. Honestly, I know Washington beat them, but it was in Washington, and Dan Lanning again take the points. Didn't. I think Oregon is a more dangerous team, tooth and nail, than Washington on uneven soil, and so I'm happy that Washington beat them. And Washington's not looked good. They barely beat Arizona State. They almost lost to a terrible Stanford team. The score is 42-33, but that's a lot closer than it was. It was 35-33. Stanford didn't, get the extra zhuzh to make it closer. It was Washington that put that extra points on the board. And unfortunately, we're in a space where we're rooting for Florida State, Ohio State, Michigan, and Georgia to lose. I don't foresee Georgia losing. They have tough games, but most of their games are at home. Florida State is, you can only pray that they drop a game. They looked pretty good against Wake Forest. And then look, we'll see Michigan and Ohio State. One of them will lose. And I'm as at my heart, you guys know I root for Ohio State, so I'm hoping Ohio State wins. But from as a Texas standpoint, I'm hoping Michigan beats them and beats them pretty handily, which I think is plausible with the way Kyle McCord's been playing and the way that Michigan defense has been playing. Because I think that'll exclude Ohio State from the playoffs as an at-large bid. So I think I feel better about Ohio State trying to be an at-large bid than I do Michigan. That scares me a bit more. So I think and as Texas fans, we're pulling for Michigan in that one. And then look, OU, they're behind us now. So we'll see how the committee does when the college football playoff committee comes into the mix. But
it's this week, right?
I think that's this week. So
Wednesday,
tomorrow.
Is it Tuesday? I think it's Tuesday.
Tuesdays.
Yeah.
So we'll see where they put and fit everybody. I'd be surprised that they put us in front of Oklahoma, but you never know. I mean, we've seen stranger things in the past, like that Baylor TCU moment where I think Baylor won, but they put TCU ahead of them. It was super bizarre.
Hey, neutral site game, obviously close game. They score at the very end, but they lose to Kansas, a team that we beat. And
Flick Bean, baby.
Yeah. Shout out to Mansfield, Texas. Jason Bean, starting with the mean green, then going to KU, Rock Chalk, beating the Oklahoma Sooners. So we appreciate his hard work in knocking those guys off. But yeah, I think what they've displayed over the last 2 weeks is that they can be just as shaky as some of the other teams that have lost, that are one-loss teams that are at the top of their respective conferences, right? Like Gabriel did not throw the ball well in Lawrence. He was bad through the air. He ran the ball well, and they ran the ball well as a team, but he wasn't able to get it done as he was in Dallas against the Horns. So everyone's vulnerable. We thought, 3 weeks ago that the Big 12 was really just a 2-horse race, but these other teams, like you mentioned, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, are in the mix. They've been in the mix in the last 5 to 7 years, those two teams specifically. And, we've got to take care of business the rest of the way. And just like, we're looking at Florida State's schedule, and they play Miami and they play Florida in the next 4 games. Those are huge rivalry games. Neither of those teams are ranked, but we know that anything can happen in those games. We also play Texas Tech at the end of the season. They're not ranked, but anything can happen in that game too. That's about as crazy of a rivalry game as we have in second place, after OU. So it's just about taking care of business at this point. But the college football landscape is wide open, except for Georgia and Florida State and whoever wins that Michigan-Ohio State game, like you said, Josh. So
you just got to hope that, it gets really murky if Alabama and Georgia dance and Alabama beats Georgia.
Win.
Yeah, that'd be big. We're big Tide fans, ironically, based on years prior. But yeah, USC too, man. If USC comes in the clutch, which their defense is so pitiful, I can't imagine that happening. And then players are great, but the coordinating is terrible. If they somehow beat Washington at home, this upcoming weekend, that could be really beneficial for us. So we are ironically Trojan fans and Bama fans in the interim future, and they play Oregon too in the near future. Okay, Fisher, Tosopoulos, DJ, Nikki, Snacks, Crider. We'll see you guys next time with Quan Cosby. Get your horns up. On to K-State at home. The 11 a.m. CT, 9 a.m. PST kickoff. What are they doing to us? Vibe killers.